only see a little sliver of the welcome team. For the hydrodynamics season, we expect teams to complete a two-part annual challenge, what we do, while learning and practicing our core values, how we do what we do. In the robot game, first LEGO League teams must solve a series of water-themed missions on our fields. The details of each mission are found in the challenge, and the rules of the robot game are located in the challenge guide. Make sure you have those documents along with the challenge updates we'll release periodically throughout the season. Teams also embark on a project. This year, teams have been asked to identify a problem within the human water cycle, design a solution that makes this problem better, and share their problem and solution with others. The challenge outlines your project essentials, those elements you want to make sure you include. The challenge guide gives greater details and resources. If you're a new team, you want to read both documents very carefully, as well as those challenge updates. And if you're a veteran, you may not need some of the information in the challenge guide. Of course, we expect teams to exemplify our core values throughout their work and the season. When conducting your project research, it's a great idea to consult with experts like today's presenter, Sean Russell. Sean is the program manager for the EarthEcho Water Challenge at EarthEcho International. Sean has dedicated his professional career to empowering young people with the tools and motivation they need to become involved in leadership initiatives. After graduating from the University of Florida in 2013 with a bachelor's degree in biology, Sean has worked with a diverse set of corporations, government agencies, and nonprofit organizations to elevate the role of youth leadership in the fields of marine science, education, and conservation. Sean first joined the EarthEcho International team in 2015 as a Youth Leadership Fellow, overseeing the implementation of EarthEcho's inaugural Youth Leadership Council. He currently serves as the Program Manager for the EarthEcho Water Challenge, a program designed to connect people around the world to their local waterways through water quality monitoring and empower them with the tools needed to take action to protect their water resources. He has also served in roles with Moat Marine Laboratory and Georgia Sea Grant. Sean is a member of the National Marine Educators Association Board of Directors and a former member of the State Farm Youth Advisory Board and the Board of Directors of Youth Service America and the Florida 4-H Foundation. In his spare time, Sean enjoys hiking, kayaking, scuba diving, traveling, and photography. Sean's work may spark ideas for you and your team to begin your project research. And now I'm going to turn the presentation over to our expert and let him tell you more.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Christina, and thank you all so much for having me today. It's truly an honor to be here with you and talk a little bit more about the EarthEcho Water Challenge program, but really explore how we can share some resources and insight to help support your work as you embark to look at tackling the water quality issues that you see in your local communities. So today we're really going to be diving into the importance of water quality, and we're going to talk about our local water resources. I'll also spend some time telling you a little bit about the program that I manage, the EarthEcho Water Challenge, which, as Christina mentioned, is really a global initiative designed to focus on water quality and preservation. And finally, we'll take some time to really dive into stories of young people just like all of your teams who are really taking action around water quality issues in their community, sharing solutions, and really making a big impact when it comes to some of the water quality challenges. I also want to say I'm personally really excited to hear from all of you about the work that you're thinking of and the issues that you're going to look at coming up with solutions to as you take on the first LEGO League challenges in your communities this year. So to go ahead and get started, let's just chat just a little bit about the big picture when it comes to our planet's water resources. So let's see. We are going to try to take a quick poll, so more of a quiz to start things off to see what our teams know a little bit about the water resources on our planet. So Christina, if you want to help me out, or if I need to do this on my end, to turn on our poll option here. There we go. All right, so if we can jump in with teams' responses to what percentage of the Earth's water resources are freshwater resources? 97%, 8%, 3%, or 34%? We'll give you all a moment to think about that. All right, if we want to wrap up with final answers, and Christina, I don't know if you can see on your end, or if we want to close out results here.
Yeah, so Sean, I can share the results.
Sure, that would be great.
Yeah, thank you everyone for voting. So 5% had 97% of the vote. 25% had 8% of the, I think I'm reading this wrong. I'm sorry, backwards. 97% had 5% of the vote. 8% had 25% of the vote. 3% had 47% of the vote. And 34% had 22% of the vote.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Christina, and thank you all for your responses there. So we see a little bit, got a little bit of a consolidation. We see some mixed responses there, and it's definitely a big question to think about. Obviously, when we look at the world from space, we see that we really live on a blue planet, and I'm thrilled to hear about your focus on water for the challenge this year, because it's such an important part of our world, such an important part of our planet. But when we look at the world's water resources, the water on our planet definitely makes up the majority of it, but our correct answer here, if we can go to the next slide, is, whoop, too far, here we go, is 3%. So when we look at the world, we see that, you know, about 3/4 of the Earth's surface is actually made up of water resources, but a lot of that is taken up with the ocean. And when we look at the freshwater resources on our planet, we see only about 3% of the world's water is actually freshwater. And of that 3%, only about 1% is actually in a form that's usable to us. It's found in our lakes, our rivers, our streams, our springs. A lot of that 3% is actually captured in glaciers and icebergs frozen at the poles of our planet. So that really kind of drives home the point that you know, our water resources are extremely limited, extremely precious when it comes to human health and the health of our planet. And you know, when we look at the big picture, we have the same water that we've had on the planet since the time of the dinosaurs. Our water resources are really finite, are limited, and it really, again, drives home the importance of protecting these resources because, again, as you all know, at the same time, we have this very limited supply of fresh water, but our freshwater resources are also really under threat from a variety of impacts, from overuse, from pollution, as well as other human activities. And it's really important then for all of us on this planet to have really a shared responsibility to protect our waterways and our water resources. And for all of us to come up with solutions and innovative ideas to really protect these resources for the future. And again, thrilled to hear that is your plan for the year, and we're looking forward to seeing how we can help make that happen. So let's talk about how, first of all, you're connected to your local waterways. Each one of us is connected in some way to our water resources, and it's important that people around the world really understand that. So we've got one more poll for everyone to respond to. Let's see if we can pop this up here. So which waterway is closest to you? And I realize that some of you are all in groups, so you can kind of come to a group consensus on this, but what type of water, what's your closest waterway? And it may be, you know, maybe down the street from you, it may be a few hundred miles from you, but what type of water resources is closest to where you live today? And we'll give you all, again, a few moments to think about that. All right, no right or wrong answers on this one. So, Christina, do you want to let us know what our results are?
Yes. So we got 39% are near lakes or ponds, 13% are near ocean or salt water, 42% are river or stream, 3% were swamp or wetland, and then 3% were other.
Excellent. Thank you, Christina. And thank you all for sharing that feedback and letting us know a little bit more about the local waterways where you live. Obviously, when we look at the big picture, all of these waterways in some way are really interconnected. No matter where you live, no matter how far you are from the ocean or a stream or a swamp or wetland, you're connected in some way to those resources. And at the same time, they're connected back to you. Again, as we said, our health is really interdependent on the freshwater resources and the water resources on our planet. Even at the big picture beyond just that fresh water, the ocean and our water environments really makes life on Earth habitable and able to exist. So when we take a look at the water resources around the world, let's see, I don't know, Christina, are you controlling it or am I able to? There we go.
Sean, I am controlling it,
okay.
So when you're ready,
perfect. Excellent, thank you. So when we look at our water resources, we see obviously there are a variety of water habitats and water resources around the world. And again, each of us is really connected. We have some personal connection, maybe even a personal story or relationship to our local water resources. And as you heard from Christina, I grew up in South Florida and spent most of my life living in Florida, which is a state that's extremely tied to water, surrounded by water, and has some incredible water resources. All the photos you see on the slides right now are really photos that were taken across my state at different places that I visited, whether it be springs, like you see in the top right, the Everglades, and kind of the river of grass and swamp ecosystems of South Florida. In the bottom right-hand corner there, bottom left, you see the Florida Keys and some of our beautiful ocean environments in Florida, and then some of the more swamps and lakes and rivers of North Florida in the top left. And again, we understand that we're tied and connected to these ecosystems. And when we go out and look at pictures like this, it's sometimes hard to really understand the health of these ecosystems and the health of these waterways. It looks like we have these incredible, beautiful pictures and images of our local water resources. But what we have to do to really understand that is to help test and really gain data on the quality of our water. And that's what the EarthEcho Water Challenge, the program, if you can go back one slide.
I'm sorry, Sean.
No worries. One more. There we go. Perfect. So you can go. Sorry, now I'm going to make you go forward one more if you don't mind.
No,
we'll freeze right there. Excellent. So as I said, the EarthEcho Water Challenge is a program that's really designed to do just that. And then to understand the health of our water resources, it's important that we collect data that can then help shape the solutions that we implement when it comes to protecting our water resource. We have to really understand, we have to go out and collect the data, do the science, do the research to help understand the quality of our water, more than just looking at it, more than just seeing a picture. And so the EarthEcho Water Challenge is just one initiative that's really designed to help connect people to their water resources, help them understand, just like all of you do and did, about the water in your own backyard, and help you collect data and really understand the science behind your water quality to help inform the solutions that you might come up with when it comes to protecting water resources. So the kind of the tagline for the EarthEcho Water Challenge program is test, share, protect. And it's really, for us, it's really that simple. It's about getting out in the field, anybody at any age, taking action to collect basic water quality data, and then taking that data and actually sharing it with others. And I'll share how we do that in a few minutes, but just like all of you, through the Lego League Challenge, we'll be sharing your solutions to water quality issues. It's really important for us to get out there and share the data that we learn, share what we find out about our water resources, so we can make informed decisions about protecting our water environments. And then finally, that's really that last step is protect. It's not just about collecting the data, it's not just about understanding that, but it's what do we do with that understanding? If we know our water isn't healthy, what can we do about it? How can we come up with some of those solutions, just like all of you are going to be thinking about, to actually take an active role in protecting our water resources. Now, to date, through the EarthEcho Water Challenge program, over 1.5 million people, again, of all ages, and 143 countries around the world have taken that action, gone out in their communities, and monitored their local water, and shared that data through our EarthEcho Water Challenge database. So if we go to the next slide. just wanted to briefly mention a little bit of background before we go into the water quality process. On EarthEcho International and my organization, this is a group that manages the Water Challenge program, but also a variety of other organizations. It's a nonprofit organization that was founded by Philippe and Alexandra Cousteau, the grandchildren of famous ocean explorer and conservationist Jacques Cousteau, who really first connected the world to our water environments, creating some of the first underwater cameras, co-invented scuba diving, and really helped us understand what's out there when it comes to exploring our waterways around the world. And we're able to now kind of continue that legacy through programs like the EarthEcho Water Challenge, providing resources and tools to young people around the world to take action to encourage them and ensure that they can help create a sustainable future for our planet. We'll go to the next slide. So when it comes to water quality monitoring, it's, sometimes we ask who participates. And obviously, people and organizations that focus on water quality, government agencies and groups around the world are tasked with monitoring water and understanding our waterways. But as you heard, water is really a critical element to our day-to-day lives, and we can't rely just on those individuals who are kind of full-time jobs responsible for carrying out water quality testing. It's important for all of us to get out in the community and test the water in our own backyard, and that's really what the Water Challenge is all about. You can see people in these photos of all ages, all backgrounds, and places around the world taking action to test their water quality and really help us gain a large data set to really understand what our water quality is like now and how it changes over time, because that's one of the really important things when it comes to monitoring your waterways, is not just doing it once, but really going out and doing it over the long term, going out in your community multiple times, different times of year, after different weather events, things like that, to really get that full picture of what your water quality is like over time. And so let's talk a little bit more about that. If we go to the next slide, we'll talk about that first step in the water quality monitoring process, which for us, as I said, is quite simply testing the water, getting out in the community and taking action to understand your water quality. Now, through the EarthEcho Water Challenge, we encourage groups to utilize 4 basic tests, but also there's a number of other water quality parameters to look at, things you can look at to really do a health checkup on your water quality and help understand what the state of the water is in your region. So just real briefly, a few of the things that we look at when it comes to water quality in our community. The first being dissolved oxygen. Obviously, all of us need oxygen to survive, and that also is true for our aquatic organisms, things like fish, invertebrates, a variety of other animals that live in our local waterways. And therefore, if we're talking about healthy waterways that support a diversity of wildlife and organisms, it's important to have a robust supply of oxygen in our local waterways. And so through the Water Challenge, one of the parameters that we look at is that dissolved oxygen. We're able to go out, test the water, and see how much oxygen is in our local waterways. And this is something, that, again, that can vary over time for a variety of reasons. One potential reason we may see changes is if there's pollution or runoff or something that blocks out some of the sunlight that gets into our water. We may not be able to have enough sunlight get to plants or other aquatic organisms that help produce oxygen, and that could lower the oxygen in our waterways. We may have instances where there's fish kills if the water gets too warm. Warmer water holds less oxygen than cool water. So things like that can really shift the types of organisms that can live in our local waterways when we see changes in the amount of oxygen in those waterways. Another parameter that we take a look at, something that some of you may have heard of before, is pH. And pH is a measure of how acidic the water is. And pH is measured, and if some of you have maybe a fish tank at home, you may have done this yourself for your own fish tanks or aquariums, but pH is measured on a scale from 1 to 14, with 1 being really acidic, 14 being the opposite, so more what's called basic or alkaline. Right in the middle is 7, and that's kind of neutral. And when you think of something like vinegar or lemon juice or battery acid, it's going to be really low on the pH scale, something that's highly acidic. And so that's really important in waterways as well, because the chemistry of the water helps ensure, again, what kind of life it supports, what things can actually live there successfully. And when we talk about our marine and aquatic ecosystems, most aquatic organisms like to live in a pH between 6.5 and 8. We talk about saltwater, things like it a little bit higher, closer to that 8 range. And that's really important, again, because organisms live, again, at variety, have kind of a narrow range of pH that they can tolerate before they're no longer able to live in a region. And this particular water quality measurement is something that's really come up a lot in the last few years with an issue that we're seeing in our marine environments called ocean acidification. Now, a lot of you may have heard of issues with carbon dioxide from cars, from fossil fuel burning, things like that, entering the Earth's atmosphere. And what many people don't often realize is this carbon dioxide can also be absorbed into the ocean. The ocean is a big sink for carbon dioxide. And as this process happens, the ocean is actually becoming more acidic, which is causing it to be more difficult for organisms like corals and other things that have a shell, things like crustaceans or oysters or shellfish, things like that, to grow and survive. So as that pH changes and the water becomes more acidic, it becomes harder for these really important organisms like coral reefs that make up incredible habitats in our ocean. It makes them harder for them to grow and live and survive, and so that's one of the issues we're seeing with pH in our waterways. Another third measure that we look at with the water quality is turbidity, and turbidity is really pretty simplistic. It's a measure of how clear the water is, so not necessarily the color, but how much sunlight can penetrate through the water and get to aquatic organisms like plants or corals or other things that need that sunlight to survive. And so clarity of the water can change if there's something like a natural disaster, something like we just had them from South Florida. We've been dealing with the aftermath of hurricanes and storms this summer and looking at how runoff and pollution that enters the waterways after some of those natural disasters can change the water's clarity, making it more turbid, more cloudy, and that can ultimately be damaging to the local environment if that doesn't clear up. And then finally, one that's pretty straightforward is temperature. Really just looking at how warm or how cold the water is in a certain region. And again, as you know, the organisms that live there may have a certain range of temperature they can tolerate. Obviously, if you have a fish that lives in a stream in Alaska, it's probably not going to do so well living in a warm, hot swamp in South Florida. So again, the coolness or warmth of the water is definitely going to be a factor with what kind of organisms can live there. And as I mentioned before, warmer water actually holds less oxygen than cool water. So that's another thing that comes into play with temperature. So those are just a few of the kind of the key things, again, going beyond just simply looking at our water and seeing if it looks nice, on a nice day outside, really diving in and helping us understand what's the state and what's kind of the report card of our water resources by running these tests. And again, beyond these, you can look at other things as well. You can look at nitrogen and phosphorus and other chemicals in our waterways. And one of the other fun ones to take a look at is actually looking at the invertebrates. The invertebrate organisms that live in waterways can actually tell us a lot about the health of our water. If you only see a few species that are really hardy of invertebrates living in our waterways, it could mean that the water is not that healthy. But if you see a wide variety of species living there, we know that water can support a wide variety of organisms, and it probably is a little bit of a better chance that it's a bit healthier as a result. So again, really important for us to get in, to understand the data, to understand the state of our water resources, and then to do something with that data. And just like all of you, as you come up with your first LEGO League Challenge projects and you work to identify solutions to the human water cycle challenges that you're looking at, it's important to take those solutions and then share them back with others in your community. And so if we go to the next slide, I'll share how we're doing that with the EarthEcho Water Challenge. So again, we want to take this data and do something with it. So on our website, we have a global database at monitorwater.org. And from here, you can browse results. So you see that red arrow pointing allows you to see a map of water quality participants and monitoring efforts around the world. You can see probably some even in your own backyard, people who've monitored the water in your area in the past. And you can also click Add Results, where you can add your own data points, add your own water quality data into this global effort and help broaden our understanding of our water resources. If we click on the next slide. Just as a quick overview, once you're into that platform, you can have a chance to add a site, which is really a geographic area that you're monitoring the water at over time. And again, it's really important, like I said, not to just go out one time and monitor water, but to do it on a regular basis and to see how things change over time when it comes to your water quality. Also in the same system, you can add results. So once you've pinpointed that geographic location, whether it's your school, your backyard, or down the street from your house, you can add results over time as you go out repeatedly to monitor the water. And you can see the option there as well. And then finally, if we go to the next slide, we can take one quick look at what that looks like. So you see, again, those points start to populate on that map as people around the world really come together and help identify some of the water quality issues in that community and help add that data into our global database. And if we go to the next slide. And one other piece of this, when we talk about that step of sharing, is something that I think all of you will be able to do with your programs and projects for the first LEGO League Challenge, as well as going beyond the data and really telling us your story, sharing your stories. Because data takes us so far and gets us connected to an understanding of our water resources. But what we found is what really inspires people and gets people excited and wanting to take action are stories. It's not as fun necessarily for somebody to see a graph on a chart, but really to see how people like all of you are out in the community really taking action and doing things to help address these challenges. We look at the issues and the challenges facing our world water resources. It's sometimes easy to get overwhelmed and not really know where to start or where to plug in. But it's stories like the work that all of you are doing with your first LEGO League Challenge projects that are really inspiring to other people. And if you can find ways to share your stories and share what you're doing in your community, that's the type of opportunities that really inspire others to follow in your footsteps and take the solutions that you come up with and maybe implement them and bring them to their own communities. And one opportunity I want to share with all of you as well, we're really passionate about telling the stories of young people involved in this type of work. So as you carry out your first LEGO League Challenge projects around water issues, please shoot us a note. You can check out our website, monitorwater.org/news/submit story. And we are happy to share stories of the work that you're doing on our website, on our online platforms, to help highlight and celebrate the work that all of you are doing to take an active role in addressing some of the water challenges that we're seeing around the world. So with that, I want to share just a few of those types of stories, and just to share how young people that we work with are taking this data, taking our understanding of water quality and turning it into solutions, turning it into action back in their communities. So if we go to the next slide.
Sean, so we do have several questions coming in from the audience.
Perfect, yeah.
Breaking for a minute, we can address all of those.
Absolutely.
So how many years have you been doing the EarthEcho Challenge?
Yeah, so the EarthEcho Water Challenge started in the early 2000s, and then we took the program on about 3 years ago now. It needed a new home and needed to have a new organization to kind of house the program, and it fit really well into our mission and our work, which is really all around inspiring young people to take action to protect their water resources. So we've been able to take this program on now and continue to work to grow the effort around the world.
Great. And we got one more. Are there any other ways to check water purity?
Yeah, so I can, and I hope please for the person who asked that to jump in if I'm not on the right track here. But so there are a variety of ways to test water quality. So those were 4 kind of key parameters or tests that I shared. Again, there's a couple of things. One, you can look at other parameters. So as I mentioned, you can look at the nitrogen in the water, the phosphorus in the water. You can look at the plant life or invertebrate life and see what types of organisms are there. So there's different things to look at, different parameters you can measure or look at. On the flip side, there's also different ways to measure those. So we have a test kit that we offer to students and groups getting involved in the program that's pretty simplistic. We try to make it something that's really easy, really portable, really easy for students to get out in the field and carry out these tests. It has a temperature thermometer that sticks right on the jar to make it really easy to check the temperature. It's got a little black and white circle sticker called a Secchi disc, which is what is used to measure that turbidity, that clarity of the water. And then we've got a couple of chemical reagents that are used to mix with the water in little jars, little vials, to tell the pH and the dissolved oxygen. That being said, there are a number of other tests out there. As I said, if you've done if you have a fish tank at home or ever done anything with aquariums, there's test strips you can stick in the water and see what color they turn to see the pH or the nitrogen or other factors. For groups utilizing kind of more scientific lab equipment, there's also electronic probes to where you would just stick a probe in, and a computer readout will give you the pH or the temperature, things like that. So there's definitely a variety of tools that can be used to get you to the same result. And for us, it's really whatever works well for people. It's all about how it works well for you and how you can collect that data. When people actually utilize our database, there's an opportunity to share how you collected the data. So it can be with one of our kits or with any other water testing supplies that you have. And again, variety of options for different budgets, for different kind of practicalities. Again, if you want something that's really portable and easy to use versus carrying around a larger piece of electronic equipment, or you're not in a lab, there's a variety of options there as well.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sean. We do have other questions, but we will save them for the end. If you do have questions as Sean continues his presentation, please keep sending them to us, and we'll try to get as many of those answered as possible at the end of this.
Perfect. Sounds great. Thanks, Christina. And feel free, again, to flag me and jump in. I don't know if I can see those on my end, so please feel free to jump in and stop me at any point if you think there's a best time to answer a question. All right, so let's jump a little bit, like I said, to seeing some of those stories. Again, really powerful way to communicate the work you're doing, and hopefully gives you a few ideas as you get ready to do your first LEGO League Challenge projects as well. So we'll head to the next slide. All right, so the first student I want to introduce you to is on the left there is Liam Dow. He's a student from North Carolina who is really passionate about addressing one of the issues he saw with water quality in his region. He'd been involved in monitoring water in his community for a number of years and realized that a lot of water pollution comes from streets, comes from runoff down storm drains. You know, it could come from people's yards with fertilizer. It could come from people dumping trash or things like that in their waterways or in their storm drains. And so he realized that his city needed a little help revitalizing their storm drain marking program. And you may have seen this in your community, but there are several ways that communities around the country and around the world mark their storm drains to just remind people that, you know, the things that go down your storm drain don't just stop there. They end up in waterways, they end up in rivers, and ultimately head to the ocean, even no matter where you live. So he worked directly with his local city to really revitalize their Paint the Drain program and get student volunteers to help drive this and help really coordinate this in his community. They created an educational training video for volunteers to help kind of guide them through the process, and they've been out in their community repainting these markers and reminding people of the importance of not dumping, not polluting into their local storm drains and waterways. We'll go to the next slide. All right, so the student you see on the top left here is Caitlin Higgins. She's one of the members of our EarthEcho Youth Leadership Council, which is a group of young people who help guide and shape the direction of our programs from a youth perspective. And she's been involved in working with an organization in North Carolina called Love a Sea Turtle. And they do incredible work around education and conservation in their communities. They run a summer camp program every year to help train other students how to get involved in conservation work. And she's actually taken on an initiative that I started as a high school student down in Florida called the Stow It, Don't Throw It Project. It's an initiative that I started initially because I saw the impact of plastic pollution, in this case improperly disposed of fishing line, and how it can entangle and kill sea turtles, dolphins, and other marine and aquatic wildlife. And so what we realized is we needed a solution to this challenge, and Caitlin's been helping to coordinate this effort in North Carolina for a number of years, where we're able to involve students in making personal-sized fishing line recycling bins. And these are actually made out of recycled tennis ball cans, so it was kind of an innovative use to recycle a plastic product to reuse a tennis ball container. They're labeled with educational stickers that highlight their purpose. They have a Velcro strap so people can strap them onto boats and kayaks or wherever they're fishing. And they're really both an educational outreach tool to highlight the importance of protecting wildlife from fishing line entanglement. And they're also a tool that can be directly used to store all your used fishing line until you can later properly dispose of it, properly recycle it at fishing piers and boat ramps across the country. We'll go to the next slide. So another really great way to take a look at water quality issues is through habitat restoration projects. And these are a group of students that I work with from South Florida and a group called Wild Over Wildlife. And they realized that mangroves, which are a coastal plant along many areas around the world, but definitely in South Florida, are really important to water quality. They help stabilize shorelines, so that helps prevent erosion and runoff and soil and sediment getting into the water, which can change the clarity of our waterways. They also help absorb and kind of filter pollutants from directly entering our local waterways. And again, they're really important against storm surge and changes in water temperature in storms, like we frequently have in South Florida as well. So these students work together to educate their community about this issue, and also have raised and replanted over 3,000 mangroves in their local estuary and local waterway environments to help restore and protect these habitats. We'll go to the next slide. Kind of continue with that theme, just a few other examples of how habitat restoration can help protect our water resources. You see students in the top left here planting marsh grasses in another South Florida ecosystem. In the bottom there you see a young person working on oyster restoration projects. And many marine environments and coastal areas across the country, oysters play a really key role in filtering water quality. A single oyster can filter gallons of water in a day and help clean and cleanse that water and improve the water quality of a region. And on the far right, you also see students doing some habitat restoration in Ohio working on a tree planting project. And by planting trees along their local riverbanks, they help stabilize, again, the shoreline to prevent erosion and prevent changes in water quality from sediment and runoff. And these trees also help shade the river or the waterway, helping to keep the water temperatures cooler. And they also help absorb any excess nutrients and runoff that might be making their way down toward the river as well. So just a couple examples of habitat restoration stories from across the country. We'll go to the next slide. And this is just one particular story that I really wanted to highlight today. These young people are a little bit older than some of the teams on our call here today, but this is a fantastic group that we've worked with for the last 2 months called Wander Like Water. It's a couple that are actually just finished biking 2,000 miles down the Mississippi River. We talk about storytelling and the importance of sharing solutions. They actually documented their whole journey through YouTube videos, Facebook Live, and social media. And they used water quality test kits at sites all along their journey, 20 different sites to test the water quality, and use their communication channels and their online platforms to really help share the stories of the water in these local communities. Again, very personal stories. As we said earlier, people are connected to their water resources, and really excited to see how they painted this picture of one of the really important waterways in our country along the Mississippi River. And we'll go to the next slide. Another interesting avenue that we work with young people on is around advocating for water quality improvements. So young people stepping up, talking to their local government officials, both locally and at the national level, really taking the water quality data they gain, taking their knowledge of their water ecosystems, and advocating for policies that help protect and preserve the health of their local waterways, and ultimately the health of all of us that depend on these water resources as well. So just a few images of the students that we work with, working with politicians and government officials at different levels to really let their voices be heard at a young age when it comes to protecting our waterways. And we'll go to the next slide. And as we kind of wrap up and highlight, I wanted to share one more specific highlight for all of you. Wanted to give a huge shout out to the Puerto Rico First Lego League group. They have been absolutely incredible, teaming up with us in the last few months to work on the EarthEcho Water Challenge program. And just this past Monday, they did an all-out effort for World Water Monitoring Day, which was on September 18th, this Monday. Their teams across the island got out in the community, tested their local waterways, shared those results. And we want to share, first of all, a big shout out to them as they recover from Hurricane Maria. Our thoughts are with all of them. And a big thanks for all their efforts on water quality monitoring, their commitment to really taking action around this issue. Really thrilled to have the chance to work with the amazing students and team members down in Puerto Rico. So big thanks to all of them, and a huge thanks to all of you. Again, we're really at EarthEcho all about taking action and inspiring young people to step up to the challenges that are facing our planet, especially our water planet and our water resources. And we're thrilled to learn more about the work you're doing, thrilled to support in any way that we can your efforts around coming up with solutions to the challenges facing the human water cycle, and looking forward to seeing how we can help support your work and again, tell those stories of the efforts that you're doing so others can follow in your footsteps and learn from your innovative ideas and thoughts. So with that, I keep hitting the next slide and realizing it's not on me. If we could go to the next slide and the final slide, I wanted to end with, again, really excited about what you're doing, encouraging all of you to take action, to get out in your community, to understand your local water resources, to share what you're doing and really help protect your local waterways. If you'd like to learn more, connect to us. Our website is monitorwater.org for the Water Challenge, as well as earthecho.org for our overall programs. Connect with us on social media as well. Share your stories, and feel free to reach out to me directly if there's anything that I can do to help support your teams and your work. But with that, I know we've got some questions coming in, so I want to turn it over to all of you to see how we can help, or how I can help share a little bit more about this program or ways we can support your work.
Okay, great. So the first question that we Hi, everyone. Hi. So just collecting the questions right now. The first question that we had from Jolyn is, what are some ways runoff can negatively affect humans?
That's a great question. So when we talk about runoff, it can be a variety of sources, but we talk about, for example, fertilizer runoff can be an example. It can cause algae blooms. When you have fertilizer runoff that's meant to quickly grow plants on land, and it runs off and enters our local waterways, it can definitely cause issues with algae blooms that can sometimes be toxic. They can also lead to fish kills, leading to the water to being unsanitary or unsafe in a certain region. Can also negatively affect, in some cases, seafood and other food sources, depending on the region of the world as well. In general, we can see issues with after, as an example, we just, again, continuing to face issues with hurricanes in South Florida and the Caribbean and Texas. We've seen a lot of issues with sewage runoff and overfill, things like that, that just, contaminate our water resources, our drinking water, or when it comes to the ocean and beaches, places where people recreate as well, which again can cause them to be closed due to human health concerns. We saw this last year as well. Caitlin, one of our youth leadership council members I mentioned to you, had to deal with in her community the effects of Hurricane Matthew last year, and they saw a big issue with their local river flooding over its banks and bringing in a lot of runoff into areas where it wasn't supposed to be, and they had to do a big cleanup effort at their local parks and in their local regions to help ensure it was safe for humans to return to those areas.
Thank you. We have a few questions from the audience about what are some ways to clean and filter dirty water?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a number of ways, that you could create. There are man-made filters and filtration systems. There's been some really interesting work just with plastic pollution even as well. We talk a lot about water quality and contaminants, but one of the issues that I'm really passionate about is just plastic pollution and things in our water as well. There's a fantastic project in the city of Baltimore where they have basically what they've created is like a water wheel style device that just continuously runs and kind of sucks in the trash and filters trash, big pieces of trash out of the water. And they've collected, hundreds of pounds of trash in the time that has been implemented in place, which is just kind of a cool technology, innovative idea when it comes to removing kind of larger plastic trash out of our waterways. And then one of the cool things that I always like to point to as well is, and it kind of goes in line with the habitat restoration examples. There's a lot of natural filtration methods. One of the things that we see is the importance of planting what are called riparian buffers. So basically planting trees, plants, things like that along streamlines, especially if they're near agricultural fields or areas where there may be some runoff, because those trees naturally absorb nutrients and things like that, whether it be fertilizers or even natural nutrients and runoff, instead of allowing it to dump directly into our waterways. And those trees and those plants can actually utilize that, can help them grow, and that again stabilizes shorelines, helps prevent other erosion and runoff. But again, they kind of act as that filter. Before things hit the water, they filter through those plants, whether it be, again, trees, marsh grasses, mangroves, all along our shorelines are really helpful, serving as that buffer, as that first line of defense before runoff and other contaminants gets into our waterways. And then again, one other just really cool example are the oyster restoration. Again, this one's a little bit more coastal or more marine, but if you take a look online, you can come across some really cool pictures of how quickly a single oyster or several oysters can actually filter water. Oysters naturally filter water through their body, and in the process remove contaminants, remove particulate matter, things like that, and help cleanse and clarify the water.
Great. So another question, how long does it take to clean dirty water?
That is a great question. I unfortunately don't have a great answer because it's really just going to depend on what's in the water. Obviously, coming from South Florida, we saw a huge issue several years ago now with the BP oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, and we saw efforts, extensive efforts to clean up that disaster, and we're still seeing consequences along the Gulf Coast and kind of long-term consequences affecting estuaries and the important habitats there because of that dirty water and the oil there. So even if we clean up parts of, if there's a real catastrophe or a real disaster, even if we do a really great job or strong efforts to clean something up, we can still see the lingering impacts sometimes years out. It's not always something we see right away. So that's one concern and one part of it. But again, it's really going to depend on the contamination, the issue, and our methodologies for cleaning that up. I think the good thing is we're seeing a lot of people working in this space. We're seeing people who are coming up with innovative ideas. We're seeing young people come up with innovative ideas to try out new filtration methods and new cleaning methods, which is always encouraging. And our aquatic ecosystems are resilient to an extent. So we've seen some good success stories too when it comes to restoration efforts, restoration of polluted areas, especially aquatic areas, kind of bringing back to life due to innovative ideas like the ones that all of you come up with as well.
Great, thank you. Another question from the audience, how does pH affect humans and animals near waterways?
That's a great question. So when we look at pH, for the most part, unless there's a serious kind kind of pollution incident or chemical spill or something like that, you're personally not going to notice too many pH change. I would hope you wouldn't, because again, that would be a really serious situation. When we talk about animals, it's really some of those issues, like I mentioned. Kind of the big one that comes to mind is ocean acidification. So again, some of that kind of, it's a little bit more on people's minds and radar now than it was a few years ago. But again, most animals and most organisms exist in the water in that pH range from 6.5 to 8. Again, it's on a scale of 1 to 14. 1 being really acidic. We're talking things like, acid, battery acid, way down there. Really, potent and kind of toxic things to people or animals that you wouldn't want in your water. And again, that kind of that sweet spot is in that 6.5 to 8. Again, depending on fresh or salt water, it's going to vary a little bit as well. But what we're seeing is our ocean chemistry is changing because as carbon dioxide gets into our atmosphere from human activities, it absorbs into the ocean. And that process happens really easily. The ocean is a huge sink for carbon dioxide, which is actually helpful to our planet as a whole. Just like trees absorb carbon dioxide out of the air, the ocean also helps in that process. But as that carbon dioxide builds up in the ocean, it's changing the chemistry of the ocean itself. And so it's starting to lower the pH. It's starting to make the ocean more acidic. And what we find is if you were to take a seashell and stick it in vinegar, which is an acid, you'd see it start to dissolve. And that's kind of an extreme example, but we're seeing the same effect when it comes to animals that have shells, essentially. So coral reefs, to oysters, to shrimp, to little tiny plankton that really form the basis of our ocean or our aquatic food chains. And so even though it's not a huge change necessarily, it's starting to, or not a huge change on the pH scale necessarily, it's starting to make a really big impact when it comes to our coral reefs, which are a huge biodiverse ecosystem. The ocean really play a critical role in our ocean health. And it's starting to come into play with things people rely on for food too, with seafood, with shellfish, things like that as well. So it's definitely something that we're watching very closely. One other comment on pH is when we look at that pH scale, it ranges from 1 to 14. Every time you increase a number from 1 to 2, 2 to 3, or decrease a number 3 to 4, every change by one number is actually a 10-fold increase. So a pH of 7 or pH of 6 is actually 10 times more acidic than a pH of 7. And so little changes in that pH measurement can make a big impact when it comes to organisms like coral reefs and some of the other aquatic animals and ecosystems that we see.
Great. Another question from the audience. Besides runoff, what are some big water problems that you see, Sean?
That's a great question. So, runoff is definitely a big pollution issue. We've seen issues. I think for me, one of the big ones is, and it's not even something that you measure. I'm got a little off topic, but it's not even something you measure necessarily with a test. It's is plastic pollution is definitely a big issue that we see, and it's not always just like the plastic trash that would wash down your storm drain, but one of the big issues around the world are what we call microplastics. So people are definitely taking a look at that as an issue. It's when the plastic gets out in the ocean and starts to break down into smaller and smaller pieces, to where it's basically the size of plankton that's floating around in our our lakes, our rivers, our oceans, and waterways. And so, scientists are estimating that by 2050, plastic pollution could actually outweigh fish in the ocean, which is kind of a crazy thought to think about. So that's what always kind of comes to mind for me. Definitely the issue with runoff. We talk about fertilizer runoff, pollution, oil spills. It's kind of a big category that a lot of things can kind of lump into. We definitely see issues that are not intentional. We have natural disasters like hurricanes and tsunamis. We see issues with debris, with runoff, with sewage issues in the waterways, things like that. So those are some definite concerns. And then another one, we have to really keep an eye on is temperature. Again, many organisms have a narrow range of temperature, and both on a global scale, as we see issues with climate change and changing temperatures, we're seeing changes in the temperature of our water. And again, when you have organisms that are really adapted to live in a narrow range of temperature, that can be, pretty impactful for them. So temperature is definitely another thing that we need to watch out for, both on a broad scale, but also locally. If there's a factory or something that's causing the water temperature to warm in a region, that can be a real challenge as well.
Great. Thank you. So it's looking like we have time for about 2 more questions. There are many questions still coming in. Sean, after the call, would you mind if we sent some questions over to you from the teams? Could you answer them and we can put them up on our blog?
Sure, I'd be happy to.
Okay, great. Well, let me send you those after the call. And as for right now, we have another great question that came in. Can you tell us about groundwater? What is it, and how are humans affecting the water cycle in their own backyard?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, groundwater is, one of our major water resources. Essentially, I live in a state that's, incredibly dependent on an aquifer system. So we have, the state of Florida in particular is kind of the base of our state is very much made up of limestone and other really kind of porous, essentially rock. So we have an aquifer system that connects into our springs, and groundwater is where a lot of our fresh water is essentially stored. So when we talk about that 1% of fresh water, a lot of it is kind of combined between our lakes, our streams, our rivers, but also groundwater, water that's kind of beneath the surface that we don't always think about as much, that we don't usually see as frequently as you might see as a pond or a lake down your street. Living in Florida, I've had some really interesting opportunities in some of those early pictures I showed you to kind of see the connection with our groundwater more than you can in most places through exploring our springs and doing some diving into caves and springs in Central Florida. You can see that connection between water pumping out of the ground, which is pretty fascinating to see. I've had a chance to scuba dive into springs where you feel 100 million gallons of water kind of pumping out at you at a time, which is pretty incredible. And we see that connection very well in Florida, but not always in other places. And I think it's a great point for people to understand that our fresh water is not just from surface water like our lakes, our rivers, our streams, but also that groundwater, that kind of beneath the surface water that you tap into when you dig a well, for example. And that's also something we have to think about when it comes to pollution and runoff. If you were to have chemicals get into our soil or contaminants get into our soil, that can seep down into our groundwater. So it's not always pollutants running off or something like that right into a river, but we have that issue with there's a connection between our soil and our water resources as well. And then when it comes to things in your own backyard, I think a couple of great examples, the issue that we saw with stormwater runoff, so making sure that you don't have trash or pollutants that are in an area in your yard where it could get into waterways. And that even goes for cleaning up your yard. You don't want all the lawn clippings from your grass or leaves or things like that washing down into storm sewers as well, because that's going to add nutrients to the water, that's going to affect water clarity and other issues like that. And the same goes for taking action in your community to do things as simple as planting native plants, things that can help absorb some of those nutrients. One of the things that we've talked a lot about, like recently we were just up in Ohio for World Water Monitoring Day, and we were talking about the importance of thinking through how you fertilize your yard or how you or choose not to. One of the things that we see is people will often put fertilizer on their lawn right before a rainstorm, and it's basically going to just wash right off, and that's something that people don't really understand. So it's not even necessarily going to have the desired effect, but it's kind of a waste of money on our parts to do that, and it's got to be something that washes right into our local streams and waterways. So just being really cognizant of the things that we do in our yard, when we use cleaning products, trying to choose more natural cleaning products. Again, all of these things drain back into our local waterways.
Great, thank you. And so last question. Many of our teams are going to go out in the field and do research for their project. Do you have suggestions for where they might go and the types of experts they might want to talk to?
Absolutely, that's a great question. A couple of things. One, I would definitely talk to your local water utilities. Oftentimes, school groups and other groups can get out to visit water sanitation plants, or people who are doing kind of really intensive water quality treatment work from an innovation and technology perspective. I think that's one of the, when it comes to kind of inspiring things, there's a lot of really great work being done to come up with new innovations and new technologies to help it understand our water quality in an easy, cheaper, kind of more effective way. And so reaching out to local utility companies, local government agencies that are involved in water quality, and trying to take a field trip or trying to interview them to get a little more background on the work they do is definitely an option. And then also talking with local conservation groups in the area. There's a number of groups that we work with, from environmental education centers to local conservation nonprofits that love to work with young people, that are honestly always kind of looking to work with young people. And they're doing some really great work on things like those habitat restoration efforts, or they're working to pass laws and get legislation changed to help affect water quality. And so having the chance to connect them with those groups, they're a really valuable resource. And typically they've been working in this field for a long time, so they have a really kind of thorough knowledge of the local water quality issues in your region, and they can help hopefully get you to start thinking about some of those issues. And then finally, I would say get your group together and really just get out in the field. One of the fun things about this is the opportunity to be a scientist, to get out in the field and make some of those observations on your own. Start testing your water. Start looking at what the water quality is in your neighborhood, and get some of that baseline data to help guide and shape your projects in the future.
Thank you so much, Sean, and thank you to our audience with us live and any coaches or teams who may be watching the recording. We're going to post the recording of this webinar to our resource library on our website, which is www.firstinspires.org. We also want to thank our global sponsors that are seen here, and especially to our strategic partner, LEGO Education. Thank you again, Sean, for sharing your work with our teams, and thank you, coaches and teams. We hope everyone has a great season. Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you all.